And now we're going to go over to Joe Fryer. Joe, you have seen much larger bridge collapses.
Yeah, this was pretty surreal experience to get the phone call. I was at home tonight when the newsroom called and said a bridge collapse, I-5 bridge collapse up here in Skagit County, because I was actually working in Minneapolis August 1st, 2007. It's a date I'll never forget. I was actually working in downtown Minneapolis when we started to hear sirens coming from the hospital. We were just blocks away and started to hear reports that the 35W bridge over the Mississippi River had collapsed. It was a giant collapse. Not to belittle what happened here today, but much larger than what we're seeing here today. About 100 cars were involved in that collapse. Some of them went in the water. Others were caught in various stages of the bridge, which had buckled in parts and was at different 45 and 90-degree angles. There was a school bus, and that was one of the most powerful images that thankfully was not in a bad situation. It was just feet away from possibly going into the water. There were about 50 or 60 kids in the school bus, so that could have been a much worse situation. Still, with the 35W bridge collapse, 13 people did die, about 150 were injured. The stories we heard immediately when we arrived on the scene were unbelievable, of people who were basically just sitting in traffic. It was the middle of rush hour, and suddenly, next thing you knew, they were in a free fall, falling about 80 feet to the water below. Amazing survival stories we heard. I also remember one of the men who passed away. It was believed that he had been trying to swim to another one of the victims who had a young child. There was a young child who died in the bridge collapse, and it's believed that those three victims, one of them was actually trying to save the mother and the child, and that he died a hero. There were so many incredible and heartbreaking stories that came out of the 35W bridge collapse. A surreal moment when we arrived on the scene that I'll certainly never forget. In the end, it took months of investigation, but in that case, what they were able to determine was that there was actually a design flaw with the bridge that had been built decades earlier. There was something called gusset plates, which are a little bit lower on the bridge, that sort of supported many of the beams. It turned out those plates were about half as thick as they were supposed to be, and it was a design flaw that was never caught over many decades. And then on top of that, you added the weight that was on top of the bridge. There had been a construction project, a resurfacing project going on, and they believed that that was just too much for those gusset plates to handle, and in the end, that's what caused that bridge to collapse. So definitely an eerie situation, very, very eerie to suddenly be covering another bridge collapse here 6 years later. But thankfully, the news we're hearing so far about this one here is that no fatalities so far.